Matthew Martinez. And let me just bring up his information here. Okay, so Matthew's joining us from Arapahoe Community College and graduated with an associate's degree in computer science, and he will be attending CU in the fall to pursue mechanical engineering. I'm going to turn over to you, Matthew.
Hello, my name is Matthew Martinez, and my research was on drought stress and cattle grazing's effects on prairie species growth and reproduction. Firstly, I would like to thank everyone in the RECCS program for helping me getting here and starting this project, and especially my mentor, Thomas Merchant. All right, we'll go to the first slide. So the areas of concern that we have for regarding this project is looking at how drought stress affects how prairie grasses and forbs devote resources to growth and reproduction. The reason that this is really interesting is because under normal drought stressors, drought conditions, these plants will deviate a little bit with how they will use their resources. Think of it kind of like a balancing scale in which that they will devote more resources into growth than they would be reproduction. And that's just under normal drought stresses. However, with rising temperatures in Colorado in the last 14 years, these could have greater effects on the plant species in the southern United States, southwestern United States. And the reason why is because when a plant devotes more resources into reproduction, they may not have enough resources to put towards reproduction if they put more resources towards growth. And another part of that that may exacerbate the problem is that cattle grazing may have a great effect on the plant diversity of the plant community and can harm the ecosystem services that are provided by these plants. Next slide, please. Okay, so our research question is looking at will drought stress and cattle grazing reduce the growth of plants and affect plants from successfully reproducing to sustain in their areas? So the major part about this is just seeing how do the timing of grazing, whether it be a spring graze or a fall graze, compared to no grazing at all. And we will also be seeing how, depending on whether or not the plants that we are tracking are affected by drought, water addition, and no drought or water addition plots. Next slide, please. The 4 plants that we are looking at is the prairie June grass, the hairy golden aster, Japanese brome, and the the Canadian bluegrass. Next slide, please. So this is what we looked at when it came to plant growth, is that we actually got something very interesting regarding it. As you can see here, we are tracking these 4 plants. Brojap is Bromus japonicus, which is that Japanese brome. Heterivika is the hairy golden aster, and Comac is the prairie June grass, and the Poa compressa is the Canadian bluegrass. So what we found across all these is that we actually noticed that despite being under drought conditions, whether it be control, dry, or wet, we noticed that they seem to have grown about the same rate as each other. And the only difference between like the Poa com and the other ones is that Poa com is an annual grass, so it's going to grow very tall. So that's why these ones are very tall compared to the other ones, just as to clarify why is going on. And the red dots in the middle of these box plots are the averages for these plants. So you can see that from all across all 4 plants, there wasn't much of a difference in plant height. This is really interesting because you would assume that drought would have a greater effect, but it seems that these plants are very drought resistant and may not have that much of a problem when it comes to drought or any other conditions like that, because it seems that they will grow at the same rate. But when it comes to the phenological data, when it comes to budding, that's where it changes. Next slide, please. So under when we're looking at how the timing of budding happened, which is the beginning part of it actually getting to the reproduction, because it goes from budding onto flowering onto seed ripening, it actually changes very differently. What we can see is that under control conditions, they seem to have budded earlier when we are at time that we recorded from the first to end of our recording time. We found that the ones in control seem to have budded about where it would be the beginning of its growth cycle for many of the plants. But as it gets to other ones, depending on the grays, such as the fall grays, which is the blue lines, we see that it just drastically changes from both of them, whether it be that they bloom a little earlier in the season, but much later in the season. So what we can kind of see from this is that despite these plants being very drought resistant, depending on the time of the cattle coming to graze and what they do while grazing, definitely changes how these plants start to bud. And one of the reasons that is because cattle are they're very choosy about what they eat. They will go for things that are easy to digest, easy to chew, and are not noxious. In the brojap, the Japanese brome, it only there's a very short time in which that it will actually be edible for the cows because it is a noxious weed. So they won't really eat at that. So there's an interesting part about not only is the type of timing of the cattle grazing is also when the cattle will actually graze upon that specific plant is really interesting too, and definitely changes the timing of the budding if it's not disturbed. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, what we have found is that plant drought may not have had more of an obvious difference in the growth of the plants or reproduction of the plants. However, we did see that grazing will have major differences when the plants start their reproductive cycles, and the season of grazing can affect the timing of budding. What we'd like to do in future work is continue collecting more phenological data from the timing of when the plants flowered, when the seed ripening happened, and recording the number of filled and unfilled seeds pods from the plants against this year's growth, and also compare soil moisture data against the growth and phenological data throughout the growing period of the plants. Okay, next slide. And I would like to thank the RECCS program, series in the City of Boulder Open Space and Mountain Park, and my mentor, Thomas Merchant, for helping me get here and present my findings today. Thank you.
All right, really great job, Matthew. I know it was a little bit of a overwhelming earlier with your technology issues, but thank you so much for coming back here and presenting your presentation. It was a really smooth presentation. Are there any questions for Matthew? Mm-hmm. Matthew, one question I have for you is
yes,
what was it like doing field work this summer?
It was very hot. That was one thing. But it was very fun. It was interesting to see, like, I think the difficult part that I had was trying to really focus on what I wanted to do with this research, because there's so many little tiny factors that as I was going through, like, because our research plots that we were working in, they weren't all exactly the same because of the topography of like the places that we're in. So not everything was as organized as it was. So it was kind of hard as we're going through plots, seeing like spring grays, fall grays, and then the other one being like where is our control dry and wet control plots, because the land was a little different for each one. It was very fun when things are going right and easy to find the plants. It was really hard when you couldn't find the plants. And then that day was kind of hard, and also the hot sun.